Get comfortable. Wherever you are, let yourself settle a little deeper and let the weight of the day begin to leave you. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing to remember, nothing to follow. You can let your eyes close whenever they would like to, and you can let my voice simply drift somewhere in the background, like the sound of soft rain beyond a window. Take a slow breath in and let it go, and feel how, with each breath, your body grows a little heavier, a little calmer, sinking gently into the place where you are lying. Tonight, we are going to travel somewhere very far away. Not far in distance, but far in time. We are going to drift back through the long centuries, past the noise of our own age, past the years and the years and the years, until we arrive in a small village in the Middle Ages, on an ordinary day, a very long time ago. You do not need to picture any of it clearly. Let the images be soft and half-formed, the way things are when you are almost asleep. If your mind wanders, that is perfectly fine. If you drift off before we reach the end, that is perfectly fine too. There is no end you need to stay awake for. So let us go there now, slowly and gently, to a time before clocks, before electricity, before hurry. To a quiet morning long ago, when the world was only just beginning to wake. It is the darkest, stillest part of the night, the hour before the dawn, and the village lies sleeping under a wide and quiet sky. There is no light anywhere, save for the faint silver of the stars and perhaps the last thin glow of a moon low over the fields. The houses are small and dark and close together, their rooftops of thatch and straw rising softly against the deeper dark of the land. Everything is still. The air is cool and damp, and it carries the gentle smell of earth and of wood smoke long gone cold, and of the fields that stretch away on every side. Nothing stirs. The lanes between the houses are empty, no more than worn paths of soft, dark earth, winding quietly between low walls and sleeping gardens. A dog lies curled beside a doorway, breathing slowly. Somewhere, a cow shifts its weight in the dark and is still again. The whole village is resting, as it has rested every night for longer than anyone can remember. And then, very softly, the sky begins to change. At first it is almost nothing, the faintest lifting of the dark along the edge of the world, where the flat land meets the sky, a paleness, gentle and grey, that you might not notice at all unless you were watching for it, but slowly, so slowly, it grows. The stars begin to fade, one by one, dissolving quietly into the growing light. The black of the night softens into deep blue, and then into a soft and misty grey, and the shapes of the world begin, very gradually, to return. Somewhere out beyond the houses, a bird makes its first small sound of the morning, a single note in the stillness, and then another answers, further off. And then, at last, from a low roof at the edge of the village, a cock begins to crow, and the long, slow morning has begun. Inside one of the small dark houses, a man begins to wake, and he does not wake quickly, for there are none. He wakes the way people have always woken in this place, slowly. in the grey half-light, feeling the cool air on his face and hearing the birds beginning outside. For a little while he simply lies there, in the warmth of the coarse blankets, in no hurry at all, listening to the quiet sounds of the world returning. There is his wife, still sleeping beside him, her breathing soft and even. There are the children, in the same room, small shapes bundled together in the dim light. And beyond the low wall, at the far end of the room, he can hear the gentle, patient movements of the animals, the ox and the few thin cattle stirring in the straw as the morning comes. He lies still a moment longer, and then, quietly, so as not to wake the others just yet, he rises. The house he rises in is a small and simple thing, and it is the only home he has ever known. It is built low to the ground, of timber and of woven branches packed with mud and straw, its walls thick and rough and pale, its roof a deep weight of thatch that hangs down close over the single doorway. There are no windows to speak of, only a small opening or two, closed against the night with a wooden shutter, so that inside, in these early hours, it is very dark and very still. The whole house is a single room. There are no hallways here, no stairs, no separate chambers, only this one long space, shared by the whole family, and shared too with the animals. At one end is the place where the family sleeps, on low beds of wood and straw, with blankets of rough wool. At the other end, beyond a simple partition, is the place for the beasts, where the ox and the cattle stand through the cold nights, their warmth rising softly into the room, helping to keep the family from the chill. In the middle of it all is the heart of the house, the hearth. It is not a fireplace in a wall, but simply a ring of stones upon the earthen floor, in the very centre of the room, where the fire is kept. There is no chimney. The smoke rises slowly and drifts up through the dark space beneath the roof, seeping out at last through the thatch, so that the upper air of the house is always a little hazy, and everything carries the faint, familiar smell of wood smoke. The floor is of bare earth, beaten hard and smooth by the passing of many years and many feet. It is swept and strewn here and there with rushes and straw, and it is cool underfoot in the early morning. The furniture is very plain, a table of rough boards, a bench or two, a few stools, a chest for what little the family owns. A handful of iron and wooden tools hang upon the walls. A pot rests near the hearth. There is not much, and there does not need to be much, and everything has its place. The man moves through this familiar dimness without needing to see. He knows every step of it. He goes first to the hearth, and he kneels beside the ashes of last night's fire, and he begins, gently, to wake it. For the fire is never truly let to die. Each night it is banked down, covered over with ash to keep its embers glowing softly until the morning. And each morning it is coaxed back to life. He brushes the grey ash aside, and there, beneath, the embers still glow, faint and orange and warm. He leans down close, and he breathes upon them, slowly and steadily, and the embers brighten and glow and begin to breathe with him. He feeds them a little dry straw, a few small twigs, and a thin thread of smoke rises, and then a small flame, and then another, until the fire is living once again, and its soft light flickers gently on the walls. He sits back on his heels for a moment and watches it. There is no hurry. The day is long, and it will unfold as it always does, one quiet task after another, and there is a comfort in that. A comfort in the sameness of the mornings, each so like the last. By now the others have begun to wake as well. The wife rises and wraps herself against the morning cool, and comes to the hearth. The children stir beneath their blankets, small and warm and reluctant, in no more hurry to leave their beds than children have ever been. There is a soft murmur of quiet voices, low and unhurried, the ordinary sounds of a family beginning its day. The first thing, always, is the fire and the food. There is not a great deal of food, and it does not vary much from one day to the next. But it is warm, and it is enough, and it is taken slowly. There is bread, the dark, heavy bread of the poor, made not of fine white flour but of coarse rye and barley, of whatever grain the fields have given. It is dense and chewy and honest, baked days ago, and it sits at the centre of every meal. There may be a little pottage, a thick and simple soup of grains and beans and whatever vegetables the garden has offered. Onions, perhaps, or peas, or cabbage, kept warm in the pot by the fire and added to day after day. And there is ale, weak and mild, brewed at home, drunk by everyone, even the children, for it is safer and more nourishing than the water from the stream. They gather near the warmth of the fire, and they eat without ceremony and without haste. They break the bread with their hands, they dip it in the pottage. They speak a little of the work to be done, of the weather, of the ordinary things. Outside, the light continues to grow, soft and grey and gentle, and the sounds of the waking village drift in through the open door. Another cock crowing, a distant voice, the lowing of cattle being led out somewhere down the lane. It is a plain meal and a quiet one, but there is a kind of peace in it, in the warmth and the bread and the low voices, in the whole family together, in the dim light before the work of the day begins. And when it is done, when the last of the bread is eaten and the bowls are set aside, the man takes up his tools and his simple cloak, and he steps out through the low doorway into the morning. Outside, the world is grey and soft and cool, and the mist still lies low over the land. The sun has not yet climbed above the horizon, but the sky is pale now and full of gentle light, and the village is stirring all around him. Here and there, thin threads of smoke are rising from the rooftops, straight up into the still air. Doors are opening. Other men are stepping out, as he is, with their tools upon their shoulders, and they nod to one another or call a quiet greeting across the lane, their breath faint in the cool of the morning. He makes his way along the worn earthen path that runs between the houses, past the little garden plots, past a low fence where a few hens are already scratching in the dirt, past the village pond lying flat and still and silver in the early light. A goose watches him go by. A dog trots along beside him for a while and then falls away, and slowly as he walks, the houses fall behind, and the great open fields of the village spread out before him. These fields are the whole world of the village, and they are vast, stretching away on every side to the distant edge of the woods. But they are not divided as our fields are, into neat squares, each belonging to one man. Instead, they are open and shared, laid out in long, long strips, and each family holds not a field of its own, but a scattering of these strips, here and there among the rest, so that the good land and the poor land are shared out fairly among them all. His own strips lie some way out, and he walks to them along the grassy paths that divide the great fields where the wildflowers grow. The mist is lifting now. The grass is heavy with dew, and it soaks the hem of his garment and the leather of his shoes. But he does not mind it. The air is sweet and cool and full of the smell of the earth. Larks are rising somewhere overhead, singing their high, thin songs into the brightening sky. And ahead of him, patient and waiting, stands the ox that will work beside him through the morning. He reaches his land, and he sets down his tools. And for a moment he simply stands and looks out across the wide and open country at the long strips of dark ploughed earth and pale young grain, at the distant figures of the other men bending to their own work, at the woods beyond, and the low hills, and the enormous quiet sky. And then he takes up his tool, and he bends to the day's labour, and the slow and steady rhythm of the work begins. The work of the fields is slow, and it is hard, and it goes on. And it has its own deep and unhurried rhythm. If it is the time of ploughing, then he walks all the long morning, behind the ox and the heavy wooden plough, up one strip and down the next, breaking the dark earth open in long straight furrows, the soil turning over rich and moist and brown behind the blade. It is slow work. The ox moves at its own patient pace and cannot be hurried, and there is no sense in trying, and so the man simply walks and guides the plough and lets the morning pass one furrow at a time. If it is the time of sowing, then he walks the fields with a basket at his hip, and he casts the seed across the broken earth with a slow and even sweep of his arm, this way and that way, this way and that way, scattering the grain in a wide and gentle arc, in the same motion his father used, and his father before him, back and back, through all the long generations. If it is later in the year, then there is weeding to be done, bending among the young green rows to pull the weeds by hand, and there is the tending of the animals, and always, always, there is something. The work of the land never truly ends. It only turns, slowly, with the turning of the seasons, one task giving way to the next, around and around, year after year. And as he works, the day grows warmer and brighter. The mist is long gone now. The sun has climbed above the trees, and it lies warm upon his back and shoulders. Insects hum in the grass. The larks go on singing. Now and then he pauses and straightens and rests for a moment on his tool and wipes his brow and looks out across the fields, and then he bends again to the work. There are others near him, working their own strips, and now and then a few quiet words pass between them across the open land. An easy remark, a shared complaint about the weather, a low laugh. But mostly it is quiet, and the work is done in a kind of companionable silence. Each man bent to his own task beneath the wide and gentle sky. The whole village labouring slowly and together across the shared and open fields. When the sun stands high, the work pauses, and there is rest. The man lays down his tool at last, and he straightens slowly, and he makes his way to the edge of the field, to the shade of a broad old tree that has stood there longer than any man now living. He lowers himself down onto the cool grass, with his back against the rough bark, and he lets out a long, slow breath, and for a while he simply sits and is still. It is warm now and pleasant. The shade is deep and cool and dappled with soft moving light where the sun comes through the leaves. A gentle breeze moves across the fields and the young grain ripples softly in long, slow waves, pale green and silver in the light. The sounds of the day are quiet and far away, the hum of insects, the distant lowing of a cow, the murmur of the other men resting nearby. He eats a little. There is bread again, wrapped in a cloth, and a little cheese perhaps, and cool ale to drink, and he eats slowly, in the shade, in no hurry at all. Others come and sit near him, and they share their food, and they talk in the low and easy way of men who have worked all morning and have nowhere else they need to be. They speak of the crops, and of the coming harvest, and of small, ordinary happenings in the village, a marriage, a birth, a cow that has gone lame. And then the talk fades, and they fall quiet, and some of them lie back in the grass and close their eyes and rest. For a little while, in the warmth of the middle of the day, there is nothing at all that must be done. The fields can wait. The work can wait. There is only the shade, and the soft grass, and the breeze, and the slow waving of the grain, and the deep and drowsy peace of a summer noon, long ago. The rest ends as gently as it began. One by one the men stir under the old tree, and stretch and rise slowly to their feet, and drift back out across the warm grass toward their strips of land, unhurried, for the afternoon is long and there is no need to rush at it. The man returns to his own work and takes up his tool again and settles back into the old rhythm. But the afternoon has a different feeling than the morning. The light is fuller now and warmer, and it lies heavy and golden over the whole wide country. The mist of the early hours is a memory. The air shimmers gently above the ploughed earth, and the larks have gone quiet in the heat, and the only sounds are the soft ones, the creak of the plough, the slow breath of the ox, the whisper of the young grain moving in the warm and lazy air. He works and pauses and works again. There is water in a wooden flask at the edge of the field, cool from the stream, and now and then he walks over to it and drinks slowly, and stands a moment looking out over the land, shading his eyes against the brightness. The village lies small and quiet in the distance, its rooftops warm in the sun, its smoke long since faded into the clear air. Everything is exactly where it has always been. The church tower, the dark line of the woods, the low hills beyond, blue with distance. He has looked at this view 10,000 times, and it asks nothing of him, and there is a great and simple comfort in that. The ox plods on at its own pace, which is the pace of the whole world here, the pace of the seasons and the fields themselves. Nothing in this place has ever needed to hurry. The furrows open slowly behind the blade, one after another, dark and moist and neat, and the man walks behind, his hands resting on the worn wood, his feet finding their way without being asked. His thoughts drift, the way thoughts do over long, quiet work. He thinks of small things, the fence that wants mending, the pig growing fat, the rain that will come or will not come in its own time. And then for long stretches he thinks of nothing at all, and the afternoon simply carries him, warm and slow, the way a river carries a leaf. The shadows begin, very gradually, to stretch. What was overhead light becomes slanting light. The gold of the afternoon deepens by such small degrees that no one could say when it changed, only that it is changing, always, slowly, the whole long afternoon leaning gently toward evening. A cart passes far off on the track by the woods, and the driver raises a hand, and the man raises his in return, and the cart creaks slowly out of sight, and the quiet closes back over the fields like water. There is still time. There is always time, here. Time is not something that runs out in this place. It is something the day is made of, wide and slow and deep, and the man moves through it steadily, one furrow and another, under the great warm sky, while the light grows long and the world turns gently on toward the evening. Between the work of the fields and the rest of the evening there is a third kind of time, quieter than either, and it belongs to the tools. Every tool this man owns, he knows the way you know an old companion. The plough that his father drove before him, its beam worn to a dull shine where 4 hands have rested over 2 lifetimes. The scythe with its blade thinned by 40 summers of wetting that hangs in its own place on the wall and is touched by no one else. The spade, the flail, the billhook, the good axe. There are not many of them, and not one is idle ornament, and everyone carries the marks of its years like a face, and they are cared for, patiently, constantly, because they must be. Iron is dear, wood is labour, and nothing here is thrown away that can possibly be mended. So in the slack hours, in the doorway light of late afternoon, or by the fire when the evening is long, the man works on the things he works with. He whets the scythe blade with slow, ringing strokes, testing the edge against his thumb, whetting again, in no hurry, because an edge cannot be hurried, and he likes the sound. He rubs the wooden hafts with a rag of tallow until they are smooth and dark and easy in the hand. He binds a split handle tight with wet cord that will shrink iron hard as it dries, an old trick. Everyone knows it. Everyone's grandfather knew it. There is a deep and simple pleasure in this work that has nothing to do with haste. The hands know every motion, the eye knows every grain of the wood, and the mind is free to sit quietly nearby, watching, thinking of nothing much. A tool mended tonight is a morning saved tomorrow. A blade whetted this evening cuts sweet and easy at dawn. Care flows forward through time, from the quiet hour into the busy one, and the man at his mending is lending kindness to his own tired self of tomorrow, and he knows it, and it contents him. And when each thing is done, it goes back to its own place. For everything here has one. The axe to its corner, the scythe to its pegs, the small tools to the chest, so that any of them could be found in the pitch dark by a hand that reached without thinking. The house settles a little more into order. The evening comes on, and the tools rest against the wall in the firelight, worn and ready, like the household's other family, the patient wooden and iron one, sleeping, standing up. And while the man has been out in the fields all these long hours, the house has not been idle, for the wife has her own day, and it is every bit as full as his, and it moves to the same slow and steady rhythm. Her work began where his did, in the grey hour before dawn, at the hearth. And when the men had gone to the fields, she turned to the endless quiet round of the household. There is water to be fetched, first from the well or the stream, carried back in wooden pails that swing gently against her skirts, cool and heavy, the morning light bright on the water. There is the fire to be tended, always the fire, fed and banked and coaxed, for everything in the house depends upon it. There is the garden. It lies beside the house, a small fenced square of good dark earth, and it is her kingdom. Onions and cabbages in their neat rows, beans climbing their poles, peas and leeks, and the herbs along the edge, the ones for the pot and the ones for healing, each in its place. She moves along the rows in the morning sun, bending and straightening, pulling a weed here, loosening the earth there, unhurried, her hands knowing the work so well that her mind is free to wander where it pleases. The hens follow her about the garden, hopeful and murmuring, and she scatters them a handful of grain, and they gather round her feet in a soft brown flurry. There is the ale to be brewed, every week or so, in the big vessel by the wall, the house filling with the warm, sweet smell of the malt. There is the bread, the dough mixed and kneaded and shaped and carried down the lane to the common oven, where the other women bring theirs too, and where the news of the village is traded gently back and forth while the loaves bake, whose cow has calved, whose daughter is to marry, whose roof wants thatching before the autumn rains. And through all of it, in every spare and quiet moment, there is the wool. The spinning is the work that never ends and never hurries. The distaff tucked under her arm, the spindle turning and dropping, the grey wool sliding through her fingers and becoming thread, fine and endless. She spins, standing in the doorway in the warm afternoon. She spins, watching the pot. She could spin in her sleep, very nearly. And the spindle turns and turns, patient as the mill wheel, patient as the seasons, and thread gathers on it slowly the way the day gathers hours. The children drift in and out. The pot murmurs over the fire. A neighbour calls something from the lane, and she calls something back and laughs. The sun moves along the wall of the house, marking the hours no clock is needed to tell, and by the time the light begins to slant and turn golden, the water is carried, and the garden tended, and the bread baked, and the threads spun, and the supper is beginning to breathe its warm smell into the little house, ready for the men to come home hungry out of the fields. It is a day of small things, every one of them ordinary, every one of them needful. And done together, over and over, day upon day and year upon year, they are not small at all. They are the whole quiet art of keeping a family alive and warm. And she carries that art in her hands, as her mother did, and her mother before her, all the long way back. Behind the garden, where the ground rises a little, stand the trees, a handful of apples and a pear and a damson or two, the household's orchard, and in its deep grass, facing the morning sun, the bees. The orchard asks little and gives much. In spring it is the loveliest place the family owns, a low cloud of blossom humming from first light to dusk, petals drifting onto the grass like warm snow. In summer its shade is where the wife sets the cradle while she works the garden, and where the old ones bring their bench when the house wall grows too hot. And in autumn come the apples themselves, small and sharp and sound, gathered into baskets and carried to the loft, where they lie in rows, not touching one another, filling the whole upper dark of the house with their sweet cellar smell until deep into the winter. The bees live in their row of skeps, the round hives of coiled straw, and they are spoken of in this household, as in every household, not quite as animals. They are told things. It is the old custom, older than anyone can say, that the bees must be told the news of the house, a birth, a marriage, a death. Someone goes quietly up the grass and says the words to the hives, or the bees will take offence and leave. Whether anyone entirely believes it is not the point. It is done, and has always been done, and the bees have always stayed. All summer long they work the clover and the blossom and the bean flowers, and their sound is the sound of the warm months themselves, that deep, contented hum that lies over the garden like a second sunlight. The man will stand sometimes at the end of a row, resting his back, just listening to it. No one hurries a bee, no one commands one. They keep their own order, perfect and unknowable, and the household simply lives alongside it, grateful as one lives beside a mystery that happens to make honey, and the honey comes. In its season, the one true sweetness of this world, for sugar is unheard of here. Honey for the feast days, honey for the sick, honey in the wax-scented dark of the house like stored summer, and the wax itself precious beyond the honey, for the church's own candles are made of it, and so the bees of this quiet grass slope light the mass at midwinter, which seems to everyone no more than their due. And no telling of this household would be complete without its other members, the ones beyond the low partition, the beasts, for they are as much a part of the family's fortune as the roof itself. First among them, always, is the ox. He is the great engine of the whole farm, worth more than everything else in the house together, and he is treated accordingly. Fed before the family eats, bedded deep in clean straw, looked over each evening the way a rich man looks over his gold. He is enormous and mild, a dark, patient mountain of an animal, and he has worked beside the man so many years that the two of them long ago stopped needing words. A touch on the flank, a soft sound in the throat, and he leans into the yoke, and the day begins. Children have grown up, climbing on him, while he stands chewing, unbothered, gazing at nothing. When he breathes out in the dark of the byre, it is like the house itself sighing. Then the cow, giver of the milk that becomes the butter and the cheese, mild-eyed, opinionated about her own gate and her own stall and nothing else in the world. A pig, growing quietly rounder from scraps and acorns and whey, the family's walking winter larder, and everyone knows it, and is fond of him anyway. The hens, a small, brown, bustling republic ruled by one affronted rooster, scratching all day about the yard and the garden edge, each evening filing up their plank into the coop in an order they have argued about and settled long ago. A goose or two, loud sentries better than any dog, and the dog himself, of course, half sheepdog and half everything, who works the cattle in the morning, guards the door all day, follows the children everywhere, and sleeps at night exactly across the threshold, where anyone coming in must reckon with him first. The beasts keep the family, and the family keeps the beasts. and neither could stand without the other. Their warmth heats the house through the winter. Their dung feeds the fields that feed everyone. Their sounds are the household's other heartbeat, the shifting and munching and slow breathing beyond the wall, so constant that a night without it would keep the whole family awake with its silence. And last thing, each evening, the man goes into them with the rushlight, as his father did, and looks each one over, and lays a hand on the ox's great warm side for a moment, not checking anything really, just finishing the day where the day's strength comes from. The animals turn their heads and blink slowly in the small light and go back to their chewing. All is well in the byre. All is well in the house. They are one warmth, under one roof, against one night. The children of the village live somewhere between work and play, and the border between the two is soft, and they cross it 100 times a day. They are given the small tasks, the ones that fit small hands. In the sowing season, the youngest ones walk the fresh-sown fields with clappers and loud voices, scaring the crows and pigeons from the seed, which is work, but which is also, if you are 6 years old and the morning is bright, a fine excuse to shout and run about all day beneath the open sky. They gather kindling at the wood's edge, dry sticks bundled and carried home on small shoulders. They fetch and carry, they mind the geese, they watch the pig. They take bread and ale out to the men in the fields at midday, walking carefully along the grassy paths with the precious basket held in both arms. And in between, they play. They play the games children have always played and will always play in every age of the world. They chase each other down the lanes and around the great tree on the green. They dam the little stream with mud and stones and sail leaf boats on the pool it makes. They climb where they should not climb and get stuck and get down again just before anyone sees. On the trodden earth of the green they play with a leather ball gone soft with age, shrieking in the low sun, while the old men sit by the alehouse wall and watch and shake their heads and smile into their beards. A child of this village learns the world not from books, for there are none here, but from days, from following behind the plough and asking questions, from watching the smith's hammer fall at a safe and respectful distance, the sparks leaping gold in the dark of the forge, from the priest's stories on Sunday and the grandmother's stories in winter, told low by the fire of saints and wolves and kings, half wonder and half warning. The girls learn the spindle and the garden and the oven at their mother's side, a little more each year. The boys learn the beasts and the tools and the land at their father's, the same way, season by season, until the knowledge is simply in them, the way the path knows the way to the well. By late afternoon, the younger ones grow slow and quiet, the way small children do, all their mornings running gone out of them. You might find one curled asleep in the warm grass by the garden fence in the last of the sun, with the hens stepping carefully around him. The world of these children is very small. A few fields, a few lanes, a stream, a green, and it is completely whole. Everyone they have ever met, they know by name. Every path they have ever walked leads home. They fall asleep at night in the one warm room to the low voices of their parents, and the shifting of the animals beyond the wall, and the settling of the fire, the same sounds every night of their lives. And no child anywhere has ever slept more soundly than that. On the bench by the south wall of the house, where the sun lingers longest, the old ones sit. And the whole village passes before them like a slow parade that they have watched for 60 years and have no intention of missing now. Every house has one or two of them, a grandmother spinning in the doorway, a grandfather whose ploughing days are done but whose eye for weather is sharper than ever. Their working strength is spent, but nothing else is. They mind the smallest children and shell the peas and twist straw into rope and feed the fire. All the sitting down work of the household. And their hands are never still and never hurried, because they long ago learned what the young are still learning, that hurry buys nothing here. And they are the village's memory. They remember the great frost that split the oak on the green. They remember the year of the wonderful harvest, when the barns would not hold it all, and the year of the terrible one, which they mention rarely and touch wood when they do. They remember who built which house and who married whom 2 generations back, and why those 2 families still do not sit together at the harvest supper, a story 50 years old that they tell with great relish and much shaking of heads. Ask them anything, they were there. The grandfather reads the sky the way the priest reads his book, a ring around the moon, and he says rain in 3 days. And he is right so often that no one bothers doubting any more. He can stand at the field gate, watching his son plough the same strip he ploughed for 40 years, and see in a moment what could be told him in an hour. Mostly he does not tell it. A man must plough his own furrows. He learned that from his own father, on the same bench, most likely in the same sun. The village honours them in the old ways, without ceremony. The best place by the fire is theirs, and nobody sits in it. The first mug from the new brewing goes down the bench. The young men greet them by name in the lane and get their names right back, with a nickname from 30 years ago attached, and everyone laughs. And in the low gold of the late afternoon they sit, faces webbed with a lifetime of weathers, hands folded on sticks or busy with wool, watching the children shriek around the green exactly as they themselves once shrieked, and the light lies warm on the old wall. And the whole slow river of the village flows past them, and they float upon it with perfect ease, having nowhere else to be, and needing nothing they do not have. Custodians of everything, in charge of nothing, at rest in the middle of the world they made. And this village, where he lives and works, is the whole of his world, and it is a small and simple and complete one. He was born here, in one of these low houses, and he has lived here all his life, and he will very likely die here, and never once travel more than a few miles from the place where he stands now. The nearest town is a distant thing, a day's walk away perhaps, visited only rarely. But he does not need it. Nearly everything he needs is here, in this small cluster of houses and gardens and open fields, among the people he has known since before he can remember. There is the mill, down by the stream, where the great wheel turns slowly in the flowing water, and where all the village brings its grain to be ground into flour. There is the smith at his forge, where the fire glows and the hammer rings, mending the tools and the ploughs and the horses' shoes of the whole community. There is the alehouse, of a sort, where men gather in the evenings. There are the gardens beside each house, where the beans and cabbages and onions grow, and the few precious hens, and perhaps a pig, and at the heart of it all stands the church. It is the largest building in the village by far, of stone, solid and enduring, its tower rising above the low thatched roofs, and its bell marking out the hours and the days and the seasons of every life here. On Sundays, the whole village gathers within its cool stone walls. Its round of feasts and holy days shapes the year. It is the one great constant, standing quietly at the centre of everything, older than any living memory. And somewhere nearby, on rising ground, perhaps, or beyond the fields, there stands the manor, the house of the Lord. For this village and its fields, and in a sense its people, all belong to the Lord of the manor. The peasant holds his land from the Lord, and in return he owes him labour and a share of what he grows, working the Lord's own fields as well as his own. It is simply the way of things, the order of the world as he has always known it, unquestioned and unchanging. But these are large matters, and they need not trouble us now. For the man beneath the tree, the world is smaller and simpler and closer than all of that. It is the field he works, and the house he returns to, and the faces he knows, and the slow turning of the ordinary days. It is enough. It is a whole life, complete in itself, lived quietly in one small green corner of the wide world, a very long time ago. At the middle of the village, where the lanes meet, stands the well, and if the church is the village's soul, the well is its meeting place and its morning newspaper and its beating heart of plain, cold water. It is old past knowing, stone-lipped, moss-grown on the shady side, with an oak roller worn into hollows by the rope of generations. The water stands far down in its round of darkness, and when you lean over the edge, a cool breath rises against your face, smelling of stone and deep earth, and your own small face looks back at you from far below, ringed with sky. All day the village comes to it. The women in the morning with their pails and their news, and the drawing of water stretches easily to twice its needful length, while the real business, the talk, goes back and forth across the well mouth. Children sent for water in the afternoon, hauling on the rope with their whole small weight, walking home, concentrating tremendously, the full pail bumping their shins. The men at evening, watering the beasts at the long trough beside it. The cattle sucking up their gallons in great patient draughts, while their masters lean on the trough edge and settle the small affairs of the day. The rhythm of the rope and roller is one of the village's oldest songs. The creak and the creak and the creak as the bucket goes down. The far small splash. The deeper creaking of the wind up, slower, heavier, and the bucket rising into the light, brimming and swaying, spilling its cold, bright rings back down into the dark. No one hears it anymore, it is as constant as the birds. And no one either ever quite loses their small respect for the well itself, the one deep place in a flat and open world, the village's own piece of mystery, into which no child in living memory has fallen, because every child in living memory has been warned by every grandmother in terms they never forgot. The water itself is simply good. Cold in high summer when everything else is warm, never frozen in the deepest winter, always the same, always there. It makes the pottage and the ale and the bread. It washes the newborn and the dead. Every soul in the village is made of it, mostly, and has been for as long as the village has stood. Rain falls on the far hills and finds its slow, dark way down through the earth over years, no one knows how many, and rises at last in this one stone ring at the middle of these particular lives. The people do not think of it that way, of course. They think the water is good, and the rope wants replacing before winter. But they built their whole world around it, all the same. Down at the bottom of the village, where the land folds gently and the stream runs deeper, stands the mill. And of all the places in this small world, it may be the drowsiest. The great wheel turns in the water, slow and endless, and it has been turning since before the oldest man in the village was born. Water slides over the dark wooden paddles and falls and gathers and slides again, and the sound of it never stops and never changes, a deep, wet rhythm underneath everything, so constant that the miller himself no longer hears it at all, the way a man does not hear his own heart. The peasant comes here when there is grain to be ground, a sack across his shoulder or balanced on the back of the patient donkey. Inside, the mill is dim and dusty and warm, and the air is full of the soft white haze of flour, and everything, the beams, the ropes, the miller's eyebrows, wears a gentle powdering of it. The great stones turn against each other with a low and steady rumble that you feel in your chest more than hear, grain trickling down between them in a thin golden stream and coming out below a soft pale meal, the whole building humming and creaking gently around the slow heartbeat of the wheel. And there is always waiting at the mill. Other men are ahead of you, other sacks in the queue, and no stone on earth can be hurried. So the men wait, leaning against the doorposts in the sun, or sitting on the low wall above the stream, and they talk, slowly, of slow things, the water level, the weather, the harvest. Or they say nothing at all, and simply sit, watching the water go by beneath the willows, bright and endless, carrying its little fleets of leaves down from somewhere and away to somewhere else. The stream was here before the village. It will be here after. It asks for nothing and it never tires, and there are far worse ways to spend an hour of an afternoon, long ago, than sitting above it in the dappled shade, listening to the wheel turn, waiting for your flour. When at last the sack is filled again, plump and warm, and smelling of bread not yet made, the man shoulders it and climbs the lane, home through the low golden light. A little dust of flour on his shoulders, the sound of the wheel fading gently behind him, until it is only the ordinary quiet of the evening again. A little apart from the other houses, because of the fire, stands the smithy, and there is no doorway in the village that children pass more slowly. Inside it is always half night. The smith keeps his windows small and his room dark on purpose, for his work is done by colour, and only in shadow can he read the iron truly, the dull red that is too cool, the singing orange that is ready, the rare white glare that means haste. The forge glows in the gloom like a tame piece of the sun, and when the great bellows breathe, long and slow, whoosh, and again, whoosh, the coals rouse from grey to gold, and the whole dark room blushes with light. The smith himself is exactly what every village smith has always been, broad as his own anvil, mild as milk, outside his forge and absolute within it. He mends what the village breaks. Plough irons in the spring, scythe blades at midsummer, the mill's great gudgeon when it groans, hinges, latches, chains, the priest's candlestick, a toy hoop for a child if the day is slow and no one is looking. Horses and oxen come to his door to be shod and stand with the patience of their kind while he lifts each foot in turn, crooning at them, his hammer tapping soft and quick, and the sound of him is the village's daytime bell. The ring of hammer on anvil carries everywhere, bright and rhythmic, tink, tink, ta, tink, and everyone hears without listening and knows without thinking that all is ordinary and well. The rhythm of it is old and has its own music, hard blows on the work and light ones on the bare anvil between, the smith's way of resting his arm without losing his time. A habit so old that smiths themselves no longer know they do it. To stand in his doorway at a respectful distance, as every child does, is to watch plain magic. The dead grey bar goes into the fire. The bellows sigh, and out it comes alive, glowing, soft as clay for its one bright minute. And the hammer falls, and the sparks leap up in fountains, and the thing is bent and drawn and persuaded, blow by blow, into what the village needs it to be. Then the hiss and thunder of the quenching trough, a plume of steam to the rafters, and the magic is over. And there on the anvil lies a hinge, or a blade, or a horseshoe, grey again, ordinary again, ticking softly to itself as it cools. By evening the fire is banked, the great doors closed, the ringing done. The smith walks home like any other man, washing at the trough, larger than most and quieter than most, as men who spend their days with fire often are. And behind him the forge settles into the dark, warm-hearted still under its banked coals, keeping like the houses their own small share of fire, asleep until morning. Beyond the last of the fields, where the strips give way to rough grass and the grass gives way to shadow, the forest begins. It stands along the whole edge of the village world like a dark green wall, older than anything, and the life of the village leans against it the way a house leans against a hill. The men go into it at the proper times, for wood, not to fell the great trees, for those belong to the Lord, and every man knows it, but for the fallen and the dead, the dry branches brought down by winter storms, the tangled underwood that may be cut and bundled and carried home. Firewood is gathered the whole year round, patiently, load by load, and stacked against the house wall higher and higher as the cold months come near. For a family without wood is a family without warmth, without cooked food, without light in the long dark, and no one lets the pile grow low. In the autumn, the pigs go in. It is one of the old rites, written nowhere and known by everyone, and the swineherd drives the village pigs in among the oaks and beeches where the acorns and the beechnuts lie thick in the leaf mould, and for weeks the pigs root and grunt and grow marvellously fat under the bare branches, and their steady, contented snuffling is the sound of winter provisions being made. The women and children go in too, at the edges, in their seasons, for berries in the late summer, and hazelnuts in September, and mushrooms after rain, and herbs and moss, and all the small, quiet harvest that the wood gives freely to those who know where to look. They keep to the paths and the light places. For the deep wood is another matter, and everyone knows that as well. Under the trees the light is green and hushed. Sounds do not carry as they do in the open. A pigeon claps its wings somewhere high up and is gone. A woodpecker knocks, far off, and stops. The great trunks stand in their own stillness, column after column fading away into shadow, and the air smells of leaf and earth and old rain. The forest is not unfriendly, but it is very old, and it belongs to itself, and the village people move through its edges the way one moves through a great man's hall, quietly, taking only what is offered, and always, without quite thinking about it, keeping the bright doorway of the open fields somewhere at their backs. And at evening, from the fields, the forest is beautiful and far away again, a long, dark band beneath the sunset, keeping its own counsel, holding up its share of the sky. The village lies safe in its lap of open land, lights beginning to glimmer, smoke rising, and between the two, the fields and the wood, there is the old quiet agreement that each will keep to its own, tonight and every night, as they always have. And then there are the days when the sky itself decides the shape of things, and the village wakes to the sound of rain. It announces itself in the dark, long before dawn, a soft new voice in the thatch overhead, a whispering, a pattering, growing steadier and settling in. The man wakes and hears it and knows before he opens his eyes what kind of day it will be. If the rain is gentle and the season needs it, he hears it the way a man hears good news, the fields drinking, the young grain standing taller by evening. He lies a while in the warmth, just listening to it, the oldest lullaby there is, water on straw, and the whole dim house breathes slower for it. There is no ploughing in real rain, no mowing, no work that the weather owns. So the day turns indoors, and it has its own quiet order. The door stands half open for the light, and the grey day looks in, and the rain streams softly from the deep eaves in bright ropes and lines. The man settles to the mending that always waits for such a day, the harness, the baskets, a new tooth for the rake, working in the doorway light with the rain for company. The wife is glad of him underfoot, or says she is not, which is the same thing said in the old married way. The children, penned in, invent kingdoms in the corners, and quarrel, and are given wool to wind, and the little house is full and warm and murmuring while the world outside is water. Out in the wet, the village goes on at half pace. Someone splashes down the lane under a sack worn hoodwise, clogs sucking in the mud, and is laughed at from doorways, and laughs back. The ducks alone are delighted, out in the widening puddles, upended and busy, having waited all their lives for exactly this. The pond fills. The stream rises and hurries, brown and important. Smoke from the rooftops beats down low and sweet in the heavy air, and every open door glows faint and orange against the grey. By afternoon, perhaps, it eases. The drip of the eaves slows, the light lifts a little, and the world stands rinsed and dark and shining. Every leaf heavy, every rut a silver mirror. The man walks out as far as the gate to look at his fields, as he must, as every farmer in every age has walked out after rain and stands there a while in the washed, still air, reading the sky over the woods. It smells of earth and green things, and cold iron, the oldest smell of all. Rain on a warm land. The grain has drunk, the garden has drunk. Tomorrow the sun will come back, and the work with it. And if the rain sets in again at dusk and holds all night, so much the better. For of all the sounds this house knows, none carries its people into sleep more surely. The fire low, the family bedded warm, the beasts dry in the byre, and the rain going on and on above them in the dark, steady and endless and kind, on the good thick roof that keeps them, and always has. Not every day is like every other. Now and then, a handful of times in a season, comes a day with a different shape to it entirely, and it begins even earlier than the rest. Market Day. The town is not far, as the world measures things now, but it is a good half-morning's walk, and so the household is up in the dark, and the baskets and bundles are made ready by firelight. Eggs packed in straw, a round of cheese wrapped in a cloth, wool perhaps, or a pair of hens with their legs tied gently, blinking and affronted under the wife's arm. What the family has more of than it needs goes to market, and what it cannot make at home comes back. The road in the early light is a quiet procession. From every lane and every village along the way they come, folk walking with baskets on their heads and bundles on their backs, donkeys stepping neatly under their loads, a creaking cart or two, geese being driven along in a white indignant crowd. Neighbours fall in with neighbours. The talk is easy and slow, and the miles pass underfoot, and the sun comes up over the hedges and warms everyone's backs. And ahead, little by little, the town rises out of the plain. Its walls and its towers and its smoke, 20 times the size of the village, and to a village child the very edge of the imaginable world. Inside the gates everything is noise and colour and wonder. The market square is packed with stalls and awnings, and the air is thick with smells. Bread and fish and leather and spice, and everyone is calling their wares at once. Here is the potter with his rows of brown jugs. Here the rope maker, the basket weaver, the seller of salt, that precious thing, and the smith's cousin with knives and nails and needles laid out on a dark cloth. The wife sells her eggs and her cheese unhurried, knowing their worth to a farthing. The man trades for the things the village cannot make, a new blade for the scythe, salt, an iron pot to replace the one worn thin. If the year has been kind, there may be a ribbon for the daughter, a handful of raisins for the small ones, wonders from far away. And then, with the afternoon, it is done. The baskets are light now, and the purse is careful, and the long road home unrolls slow and golden ahead. The geese are gone, the eggs are gone, the noise of the town sinks away behind, and the quiet of the open country comes back like a friend. The walkers are wearier now, and the talk is softer, and the shadows walk long beside them all the way. And when at last the familiar rooftops rise ahead, and the dog comes out barking with joy, the village feels smaller than it did at dawn, and warmer, and more than ever like the only place in the world worth coming back to. And then, once in every 7 days, the whole great wheel of work simply stops. On Sunday morning, no plough goes out. The bell begins in the cool of the early light, unhurried, one slow stroke after another, rolling out over the rooftops and the empty fields, and from every door in the village the people come, washed and combed and wearing their better clothes, walking all together up the lane to the church. Inside, the light falls dim and coloured through the small high windows, and the air is cool as a cellar, and smells of stone and candle smoke. The whole village stands together in the nave, farmers and wives, and old men and infants, everyone, and the priest's voice rises and falls in the old language that no one speaks and everyone knows, the same words in the same order as every Sunday of their lives, and of their parents' lives, and their grandparents. A man may let the sounds wash over him like water. The candles waver, the village breathes around him. For this 1 hour, the whole world is in one room and at rest. And afterwards, the day is their own, the one day that is. The men stand talking in the churchyard, sun far longer than they need to. The green fills with children. There is visiting and idling, and sitting on benches by doorways, doing nothing at all with great satisfaction. The afternoon stretches out ahead, with no task in it, and passes twice as sweetly for that. And it is by Sundays and saints' days that the year itself is told. Not by numbers, for who needs numbers, but by feasts, each one a bright mark on the slow-turning wheel. Candles against the dark of midwinter and the green boughs and great log of the Christmas season. 12 whole days of rest and firelight in the deepest dark. Eggs and new light at Easter with the spring. Fires on the eve of midsummer, when the young folk stay out on the green half the warm night. The harvest church feast with the barns full, the whole village at long tables, ale and music and dancing in the golden dust of the year's end. Little feasts and great ones, scattered through the calendar like glimmering stones on a path, so that there is always one behind you just fading, and always one ahead to walk toward, however long the working weeks between. So the year turns, Sunday by Sunday, feast by feast, rest folded into labour like thread into cloth. And perhaps that is the deepest quiet of this old world, that its rest was not stolen from its work, but woven into it, from the beginning, by a rhythm older than anyone, that everyone trusted and no one needed to think about at all. When the day's work is done and the supper eaten and the evening stretches mild and long, a man may walk down to the alehouse, and many do, for it is the village's other hearth. It is not a grand thing. It is a house like the others, only a little larger, where the widow who keeps it brews more ale than one household needs and sells the difference. And a green bough hung over the door tells the lane when the new brewing is ready. Inside there is one long room, a good fire, benches worn smooth by generations of the same families sitting in the same places, and light enough to see your neighbour's face and your own mug and not much else, which is all the light such evenings have ever needed. The ale is brown and mild and honest, and it is drunk slowly, for the evening is long and no one is rich. The talk is the true refreshment, and it moves like a slow wheel through the only subjects there are: the weather, the crops, the beasts, the Lord's new reeve, the price of iron, the strange traveller who passed on the road last week, and round again to the weather. Nothing is decided quickly. Nothing needs to be. A question raised on Monday may be settled comfortably by Thursday, all parties having slept on it 3 times, and the village's affairs are the better for it. There is laughter, the low, unhurried kind, at jokes 20 years old that have worn smooth and comfortable as the benches. There are the arguments, too, the same eternal friendly ones, revived whenever the fire burns low, whose ox is stronger, whose grandfather mowed a field faster in a summer no one else alive remembers, whether the far pasture floods worse now than in the old days. Voices rise a little, hands are slapped on knees, and it all subsides again into the general warm murmur, having been not a quarrel at all, but a kind of song everyone knows their part in. Someone, some evenings, has a pipe or a fiddle, and plays low, and a song goes round, the old ones, sung more from the chest than the mouth. And men who would blush to sing alone sing well enough together in the half-dark. The fire settles. The widow moves along the benches with her jug. Outside the door the village lies quiet under the first stars, and inside there is this one room of light and voices, like a lantern in the middle of the great dark countryside. And then, not late, for dawn keeps its own opinions about bedtime, the men rise one by one and stretch and give the good nights and go out into the cool. They walk home along the lanes by starlight and habit, unhurried, warm inside and out, each to his own dark doorway and his own banked fire. The widow damps her hearth and bars her door. And the alehouse, too, goes to sleep. The benches empty, the mugs on their shelf, the room holding the shape of the evening's talk in its silence, ready to hold tomorrow's. One road runs through the village, in at one end and out at the other, and it is the thinnest of all threads binding this small world to the great one beyond. Mostly the road is quiet. It belongs to the village itself, to the cattle and the carts and the children and the geese. But every so often it brings a stranger, and a stranger is an event. The peddler comes a few times in a year, his pack towering, hung about with ribbons and pans and wonders, and his arrival gathers the women and children as sweetly as the church bell. He spreads his cloth by the well and lays out needles and pans, combs and small knives, ribbons red and blue, buckles, beads and news. Always news, for the pedlar is the country's walking gazette, and he retails the doings of the whole shire with his ribbons, a fair in one place, a wedding in another, a two-headed calf somewhere that grows another head with each telling. Pilgrims pass, in their season, in their road-stained clothes, with their staffs and their scallop badges, bound for shrines whose names the village knows like distant stars. They are given water and bread and a place by a fire, for that is the custom and brings a blessing, and in return they leave stories of the road, of towns with stone bridges, of the sea which few here will ever look upon. A friar comes through, preaching by the well. A messenger on a real horse passes at a canter, mud to the eyes, bound for somewhere important, and the village discusses him pleasurably for 2 days. And that is the wide world, as it is known here, a dust of marvels carried through on other men's shoes. The village listens and wonders, and shakes its head and is not envious. For the news from far away is mostly of trouble, wars and prices and the doings of the great, and it all sounds like weather from another country, real enough, no doubt, but nothing a sensible man can plough by. The kingdom is out there somewhere, and the sea and the great city with its towers. Meanwhile the pig wants feeding. Sometimes, of an evening, a young man of the village stands at the road's edge, in the last light, looking down its long, pale line, to where it climbs the far hill and disappears, and feels the pull of it, as young men always have. Somewhere down there is everything else. And perhaps one day. But the supper smoke is rising behind him, and the dog has come to find him. And the road will still be there tomorrow and the day after. he turns back in. Almost always, in this age of the world, he turns back in, and the road runs on alone in the dusk, patient as all roads, keeping the wide world for another day. Every field of this village has a name, and every name has a reason, though half the reasons are older than memory and have worn away like the letters on a stone. There is the long furlong, which is exactly what it says. There is the ox close, and the mill field, and the well meadow, plain names for plain places. But there is also the hungry hill, which no one now can explain, and Dead Man's Acre, about which the old ones tell 3 different stories, all of them enjoyable and none of them agreed upon. There is a great stone in the middle of one pasture that no plough has ever moved and no one has ever seriously suggested moving, and the strip beside it is called Stoneland, and so it has been called, most likely, for as long as there has been a plough in this valley at all. The men carry this whole map in their heads, every strip and balk and boundary of it, and never think of it as knowledge. Say any name and they know the ground, how it drains, how it ploughs, which end floods, where the good land runs thin. The names are how the village thinks about its world, and they pass from father to son with the tools and the strips themselves, so that a man ploughing the long furlong is ploughing inside a word his great-great-grandfather used for the same earth. And once in a year in the spring the village walks its own edges, all together, the priest in front and the children brought along on purpose out along the old line where this parish ends and the next begins. From the leaning ash to the boundary stone in the stream, to the double oak, to the cross-marked rock on the hill, the whole slow circuit of everything that is theirs. At each mark the old men tell the young ones what it is and why it matters, and the smallest boys, by the rougher old custom, are bumped gently against the boundary stones, so that their bones will remember what their heads might not. It is law of a kind, done without a single written word. It is also, though no one would say it so, a kind of love. I said, I being sure and did Arthur at a dist for a good defined starage story. In entral in my, I joined profuse and going in borning with had wood. I says had Arthur owned. I said, this much earth and no more walked and named and known, handed whole, from the dead to the unborn. The village does not own the land exactly as later ages will understand owning. It belongs to the land and keeps the land's names the way a family keeps its own. And the walking of the bounds is the year's quiet way of saying so. Some days of the year do not belong to the family at all, and everyone knows which ones they are. They are the Lord's days, and they are part of the oldest bargain in this world. For the land the peasant works is held, not owned. The strips that feed his family come to him from the lord of the manor, and the rent is paid not in coin, of which he has almost none, but in days. So many days of ploughing on the Lord's own land in spring, so many days at his haymaking, and at harvest the great boon days, when every household in the village sends its workers to bring the Lord's corn in before the weather turns. On such a morning the whole village walks out together, not to their own scattered strips, but to the demesne, the Lord's broad fields, and works them side by side. The reeve, a village man himself, chosen from among them, keeps the order of it, who mows, who binds, who carts, and keeps the tally, for every family's duty is known to the day, set down in custom as firm as any stone. And it is not, in truth, the worst of days. The work is the same work they do for themselves, and they do it the same way, at the pace of the scythe and the ox, no faster. There is company in it. The whole village strung across one great field is a rare sight and makes its own cheer. And custom, which binds the peasant to the work, binds the lord as well, and everyone knows that part of the bargain to the crumb. On the great boon days the lord feeds his workers, and the food is his, not theirs. Bread and cheese and ale at noon, brought out to the field, and by long habit it is better food than every day's, and woe to the lord whose ale runs thin, for that will be remembered against him for a generation. So the day passes, heavy and companionable, and the Lord's corn goes into the Lord's great barn, and the bargain is kept for another year. The peasant walks home at dusk, owing nothing until the next quarter day, his conscience as clear as his duties. Everything paid in the only coin he has, which is the strength of his back and the days of his year. It is not freedom, as later ages will use the word, but it is order, deep and old and understood on every side, and a man can rest inside an order he understands, and this man does, and sleeps none the worse for it. And the days turn, as they always do, into the seasons, and the seasons turn slowly into the year. In the spring, the land wakes, as he does, out of the cold and dark. The earth softens, and the ploughing and the sowing come, and the fields are turned and seeded, and the first green shoots rise pale and tender from the dark soil. The days grow longer, the animals bear their young. The whole world seems to lean gently toward the light, and there is hope in it, and hard work, and the long promise of the year ahead. In the summer, the land is green and full and growing. The grain rises tall in the fields, ripening slowly from green to gold. There is weeding and tending and the mending of 100 small things, and the long warm days beneath the wide sky. And then, at summer's end, comes the harvest, the great labour of the year, when the whole village goes out into the fields together, day after day, to cut the ripe grain with their curved blades, and gather it, and bind it, and bring it in. It is the hardest work of all, and the most important. For what is gathered now must last through all the year to come. In the autumn, the work slows, and the year begins to turn toward rest. The fields lie cut and bare. The last fruits are gathered. Some of the animals are slaughtered, for there is not enough to feed them all through the winter, and the meat is salted and stored away. The days grow short. The air grows cold and sharp, and the village draws in upon itself, closer to the hearth, closer to home, as the great dark and cold of winter comes on. And in the winter, at last, the land sleeps. The fields lie still and frozen beneath the grey sky, or white beneath the snow. There is little work that can be done outside, and the days are short and dark. Now the family stays close by the fire, in the smoky warmth of the little house, mending tools, spinning wool, telling the old stories, waiting. It is a quiet time, and a still one, a long rest at the bottom of the year, and then, in its own slow time, the light returns, and the earth softens once again, and the whole great wheel turns round to spring, and it all begins again, as it always has and always will. Before the corn harvest, in the high green middle of summer, comes the hay, and haymaking is the harvest's gentler sister, the sweetest heavy work of the whole year. The meadows have been let grow since spring, shut up and left alone, until the grass stands waist-deep and thick with flowers, and the whole village has watched them ripen the way a household watches bread rise. Then come the fine days, and the men go out with their scythes in the cool of the morning, when the dew still lies and the grass mows sweetest, and the long line of them moves down the meadow stroke by stroke, and the standing green goes over in soft swathes behind them, and the smell begins. For that is the thing about hay, the thing everyone who has ever made it remembers to the end of their days, the smell. Cut grass drying in the sun is the perfume of high summer itself, sweet and green and warm, and for a week it lies over the whole village, over the lanes and the gardens and in at every door, so that the wife kneading in the house and the child by the pond and the old man on his bench all live inside it together. The women and children come out for the turning, tossing and spreading the swathes with wooden rakes and forks so the sun can get at every side. Light work and companionable, done bare-armed in the warm wind, with talk flying up and down the meadow. The hay must be turned and turned again, and gathered into cocks against the evening damp, and spread once more next morning, everyone watching the sky the whole while, for a soaked crop is a spoiled one, and the weather-wise old men are consulted like oracles and enjoy every minute of it. And then the carting, the great load swaying up the lane, children riding high on top by ancient right, shrieking at every lurch, and the rick built in the yard, combed and trimmed as neat as thatch. The barn breathes hay. The byre is provided for. Whatever the winter brings, the ox and the cow will eat, which is to say the family will live, and it is all stored summer. Cut and dried and stacked, the meadow's whole green year folded away against the dark months, smelling faintly sweet in the loft every day until spring. But of all the seasons of the year, it is the harvest that the village will remember, and it deserves a longer look, for those weeks are like no others. It begins when the grain is ready and not a day before, and every man in the village can read that readiness at a glance, in the colour of the fields, gold beyond gold, and the dry whisper the ears make in the wind, and the way the stalks bow their heavy heads. And then, on a chosen morning, the whole village goes out together, every soul that can walk and carry, and the great work begins. The mowers go first, in a long staggered line across the field, and the scythe swings slow and level, each man at his own unhurried pace. For this is work that cannot be rushed and lasts from light to light. The blades hiss through the standing corn, stroke after stroke after stroke, and the grain goes down in long, soft rows, and the line of men moves forward so slowly that it hardly seems to move at all, and yet by noon a whole field lies changed behind them. Behind the mowers come the binders, the women and the half-grown children, gathering the fallen corn into armfuls and binding each armful about its middle with a twist of its own stalks. Quick, clever work that leaves a trail of plump sheaves standing behind them. and the sheaves are stood up together in little leaning huddles to dry, 6 or 8 at a time, until the whole shorn field is covered with them, rank upon rank in the low golden light, like a quiet encampment stretching away toward the woods. The days of harvest are long and hot, and everyone aches. And yet there is a gladness over the whole of it that no other season carries. The year's wager is being won. Bread for the winter stands drying in the sun, more of it with every hour, and everyone can see it and count it, and the relief of it is like a weight set down. Ale comes out to the field in the afternoons. There is singing, sometimes, along the line of mowers, and behind the binders come the gleaners, the old women and the smallest children, gathering the dropped and scattered ears one by one into their aprons. For by old custom what falls belongs to those who gather it, and nothing, nothing at all, is wasted. And at the very end, when the last field is cut, and the last cart stands loaded higher than a house, the whole village walks home beside it in the dusk, dusty and worn out and content. And that evening there is the harvest supper, the long tables, the lanterns, the year's great sigh of relief made into a feast. The barns are full. The winter can come when it likes now. Let it come. The village is ready, and it earned its readiness with its own hands. All together, in the golden weeks that everyone will still be speaking of, by the fire in the dark of January. And when the winter does come, and the world closes down to the small, warm circle of the hearth, the village discovers every year the same quiet secret, that the long dark evenings are not empty at all. They are full. Outside, the cold owns everything. The fields lie iron-hard or smothered in snow, the stream runs black between white banks, and the wind comes across the open land with nothing to stop it and moans softly in the thatch. The dark comes early, in the middle of the afternoon almost, and it is total, a darkness no town person of a later age will ever quite imagine, pressing right up against the shutters. But inside, the fire is lit, and the room is small enough to hold its warmth, and the animals beyond the partition add their own slow heat and their comfortable sounds, and the whole household gathers into the circle of light as it has gathered every winter evening since the house was raised. And the hands keep working, for hands here are never quite idle, but it is soft work now, evening work. The wife spins. The man mends what the year has worn, a harness strap, a rake, the handle of the good knife, whittling and binding by firelight. The grandmother's fingers move through wool without her even looking. The children crack the autumn's hazelnuts on the hearthstone. And there are the stories. This is their season. The old people carry a whole library behind their eyes, and on winter nights it opens, tales of saints and their wonders, tales of the great storm, the hard year, the wolf someone's grandfather met on the high road and stared down, a tale that has grown a little with every telling for 60 years and is none the worse for it. The children listen with huge eyes, curled against whoever is warmest, and the fire cracks and settles, and the shadows of the storyteller's hands move enormous on the wall. Later, there is perhaps a little music, someone with a pipe, a slow song everyone knows, sung low. And later still, the talk runs down, like the fire, into long, easy silences that nobody hurries to fill. The wind worries at the roof and gives up. the embers breathe. One child is asleep already and is carried to bed limp and heavy, and the others follow, one by one, burrowing into the straw and the shared warmth. The year outside is at its lowest ebb, the very bottom of the wheel, and yet here in the dark of it the house is at its warmest and closest and most content. The winter is not the enemy of this life. It is its long, quiet rest. And everyone in the little house sleeps deeper in January than they ever do in June. But we have wandered ahead through all the year, and it is still only the evening of our single quiet day. So let us return to it now, gently, as it draws to its close. The long afternoon of work has passed, slow furrow by slow furrow, and now at last the sun is sinking low over the fields. The light has turned soft and golden and warm, falling long and slanting across the land, and the shadows stretch out gentle and blue across the grass. The heat of the day is fading. A cool and quiet calm is settling over everything. The man straightens for the last time, and he lays down his tool, and he stands a moment in the golden light, looking out over the work he has done. And then he turns and he begins the slow walk home, back along the grassy balks between the fields, with the ox plodding patient beside him, and the long shadows reaching out before him, and the whole world glowing softly in the last of the light. All across the fields, the other men are turning homeward too, dark figures moving slowly toward the village through the golden evening. The smoke is rising from the rooftops once again, the cattle are being led in, and one by one the sounds of the day grow softer and fewer, until there is only the quiet of the coming night. And so we come back once more to our single day in its very last light, as the man walks the final stretch of the lane toward home. All around him, the village is folding itself up for the night, gently, in the old unchanging order. The cattle come up from the pasture at their own grave pace, swaying down the lane in single file, needing no driving, each turning in at its own gate as it has done every evening of its life. Hens are shooed in, complaining, and the coop is shut fast against the fox. Doors that stood open all day are drawn to. Somewhere a mother calls children in from the green, twice, 3 times, and the last game breaks off in the blue dusk and small feet patter home. The light goes down the sky in slow bands of amber and rose, and the first smoke of the evening fires rises from every roof, straight and soft in the still air, and the smell of it drifts along the lanes, wood smoke and supper, the smell of the day ending. Windows and doorways begin to glow here and there, faint warm seams of firelight in the gathering dark. The pond lies still as pewter. A late dog barks twice at nothing and thinks better of it. And the sounds change, one by one, from the sounds of the day to the sounds of the night. The creak of the well rope, gone. The ring of the smithy, long gone. The forge banked and dark. Voices fewer and lower, and then hardly any. Just a murmur here, a door latch there, a snatch of a mother's low song through a shutter. In their place come the night's own voices, small and old. The first owl, trying the darkness, off in the elms. Frogs down at the pond, taking up their patient chorus. The endless soft run of the stream, which was there under everything all day and can only now be heard. Above it all, the sky deepens. Blue into violet, into the first true dark, and the stars come out the way they always do, 1, and then 3, and then past, all counting, enormous and slow and bright, over the little rooftops. No lamps push back against them here. The night is allowed to be as deep as it truly is, and the village lies down inside it without fear. A handful of warm sparks, under all those cold and friendly fires. The man pauses a moment at his own gate, as people sometimes do, without knowing why. The whole day stands quietly behind him. The dawn, the fields, the furrows, the bread, the long light and the long shadows. All of it done now. All of it safe. Tomorrow will be the same day again, or near enough, and there is nothing in that thought but comfort. He lifts the latch softly, and the firelight falls out across the threshold to meet him, and he steps inside into the warmth, and the door closes gently behind him on the sleeping village and the stars. He reaches his home as the light is fading. There is a last simple meal by the fire, warm and plain and welcome, the bread and the pottage and the ale, the low voices of the family gathered close in the flickering light. The children grow drowsy. The fire burns low and warm. And outside, beyond the little house, the great dark comes gently down over the fields and the woods and the sleeping village. And the first stars appear, faint and silver, in the deepening sky. And now the day is done. There is nothing left that must be done, nothing left to tend or carry or mend. There is only rest. The fire is banked down softly beneath its ash, its embers left to glow quietly through the night, as they always are. The family settles into their beds of straw and wool in the warm and smoky dark, and a deep and peaceful stillness fills the little house. The man lies down at last, in the warmth, in the dark, and he feels the tiredness of the good day's work settle gently over him, heavy and warm and welcome. His eyes close, his breathing slows, and slowly, softly, without a care in all the world, he drifts down and down into a deep and dreamless sleep. And you may drift there too, now, if you would like to. There is nothing more to follow, nothing more to hear, only the quiet and the warmth and the soft and endless dark. Let your breathing slow, let yourself grow heavy, and sleep and sleep and sleep.